Welcome to Tony Martignetti Nonprofit Radio coverage of the NextGen Charity Conference 2011. We are at the Tribeca Performing Arts Center in downtown Manhattan. With me now is Sharyn Abbott. Sharyn is the author of Mixing It Up, The Entrepreneur's New Testament. We're going to talk about some of her entrepreneurial success ideas and how those probably very well translate to your work in nonprofits, and maybe some of her positive communication techniques also. Sharyn Abbott, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Tony. It's a pleasure.
Pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little about some of your entrepreneurial success ideas with our audience of small and mid-sized charity leaders in mind. What's the first thing you'd like to share?
Well, what I truly believe is the better connected a nonprofit is, the better that they will do. I taught entrepreneur skills for over 20 years to small business owners, and I would bring in a nonprofit to every group that I had. And at one time, I had 22 different groups with 20 to 24 people in every group to teach people how to be philanthropic, to teach them to give back to their community. And what I found is the skills that the entrepreneurs needed were the same as the nonprofits needed.
Sure.
So I taught them how to get out in the community, how to get volunteers to work with them, how to engage other people so that they didn't have to do all the work, and how they brought in a board of directors who was more proactive rather than a board of directors by name. So that made a huge difference to the nonprofits, as well as one of the things that's really hard, especially when everyone perceives the economic times being as bad as they are, is that people are tired of all these organizations putting out their hand just expecting a check. And so they need to get something back. And so I created all these different programs that are fundraising activities that are fun, that people want to participate in, that make it much easier for a nonprofit to get their budget back up where it needs to be self-sustaining, and they don't have to work as hard. So they can have a lot of them do golf tournaments, or they might do silent auctions, or they might do a singles dance. I did a big band dance for Easter Seals one year. It was a costume party. We kind of did it like an old Victorian kind of party where everybody came in as a character from the Victorian era.
Very themed events.
Right,
really.
And that way people, they really feel like they're participating more in the nonprofit rather than just here's a check, now, I'm done.
Well, let's go into some detail about let's start with, you mentioned getting into the community.
Right.
What ideas do you have specifically that nonprofits can execute?
Well, I know in California that almost every nonprofit thinks that they just need to join a chamber, and then once they join the chamber, they're done. But the activity that they have in the chamber is actually the important part, not just joining the chamber.
What would you like to see them doing then?
They need to be on various committees. Like if they were to volunteer for ambassadors, the ambassadors have to go out to every business, right? Shake hands, what are you doing? And people used to ask me, oh, you work for the chamber? I said, no, I'm just out here helping the chamber get better known what they need to have happen in the community. And then that brought me more business. So I thought, well, if it works for me, it'll work for anybody, and it does. So if a nonprofit goes out and they just find out from all of the different businesses what the business needs and then takes that back to the chamber, it's their face, their nonprofit that is remembered. So that's a great way of becoming very active. And then all chambers have fundraising events where nonprofits can actually be featured, so they can be part of the event.
All right. Well, how about beyond joining the chamber and being active in that way as an ambassador? What other advice about getting out into the community?
Well, all of the leads groups that are out there. I used to run my own.
Right,
it's a business development kind of organization where people get together on a weekly basis, which most of them do, and they have coffee and everybody talks about their business and they say, this is what I'm looking for, this is what I have to offer. So there are business leads groups, and you can find them listed in the business section of every paper. There's a website called amcity.com that lists all of the business events that are all around the country.
Okay.
They're everywhere.
Regardless where you are.
Just search for New York and you'll find in San Francisco, it's the San Francisco Business Times. Okay. I think it's probably the Times here, but in San Jose it's the Journal. So, it's one of those. So amcity.com.
Yeah. And
you can see every event that's going on every week. So if you go out to events, and let's say you meet 20 people this week, 1 out of 20 will either be somebody that'll be on the board, active in a community, help promote the nonprofit, help organize a fundraiser. Somebody in that 20 people is going to be involved with that nonprofit.
Interesting. You really want to see nonprofits getting out into the business community.
Exactly.
The first things we've talked about so far have been making those business connections, not staying within the nonprofit community.
Exactly. Because who has the money?
Okay.
Why stay in a community where everybody knows you when you can go out into a community where no one knows who you are and they're the ones who have the money?
Right. Let's share one more idea, getting that nonprofit out there.
Most nonprofits don't realize that they can do a speaking circuit. Rotary, Lions, Kiwanis, all of those kinds of social organizations. And those organizations do kind of quirky things, like if you talk out of turn, you're fined $1. If you promote your business out of turn, you're fined $5. Well, that money is allocated to helping nonprofits. Oh. So if every nonprofit were to go out to one of those once a week, and literally they're morning, noon, and night, you could go to 70 a week and not run out of them in a year. And so you go out to these organizations, you say, this is my cause, this is what I'm doing, I need your help. This is why. Here's the result of what happens when we get help. They literally write checks on the spot.
Okay. And I know there are a lot of these groups. Just in the New York area, you mentioned a bunch of different professional associations, but Rotary there's a Rotary in every county.
Oh, so, I'm probably in one block. There's 6 in New York.
Okay. Well, I know there's at least one in every county. So, and this is a big area. So
right.
There are a lot of opportunities. Plus, you mentioned all the other membership organizations: Lions,
Kiwanis, Seroptimus, Professional Business Women, eWomen Network. I mean, really, when you look in the paper, you could. When I had a travel agency in 1991, just as the Gulf War was starting, I went out morning, noon, and night, 6 days a week. And I built the travel agency from $30,000 a month to $375,000 a month in 3.5 years by doing just this. So it was all handshaking and getting to know people and making sure that people knew who I was, even though no one was traveling at the time. So I hit it at the worst time, but managed to build my business in a way that nobody else had ever thought of. I didn't spend a dime on advertising.
No, you just had transit costs to all the meetings, right?
Exactly, and breakfast and lunch.
I'm joking, I'm being sarcastic, but no, the point is very low cost.
Exactly.
Methods. And plus it should be fun for executive directors, CEOs. I mean, they should be enjoying being out in the community, in the business community, talking about their work.
That's the biggest issue, is people have fun when they're doing something that they're connecting with people, and when these organizations see how much fun that you're having, they want to be more part of it.
Yes.
So when people are saying, oh, would you write me a check, or we're short on our budget, could you help us out? It's really kind of gloomy, and people don't like being part of that. So you make it fun and entertaining.
I'm going to guess you have advice about hiring. So bringing people to your organization, and this starts at the top, but and it even applies to the board, hiring the top. But what advice do you have about bringing people in who and making sure you get people who are going to be passionate, going to love the mission, and be innovative thinkers? How do we hire these kinds of people?
I think one of the hardest things for nonprofit is inviting people into their board of directors who actually have the connections and that will make a difference for the organization. So there's a lot of people who are semi-retired, retired, and they volunteer for nonprofits, but technically they don't have the contacts and they don't have the ability to go out in the community and start helping promote other people. So if a nonprofit were to look at what's your database like, do you have social media contacts? What experience have you had with nonprofits before, and what were the results? Treat it just like a job interview. So don't take anyone on your board unless they really are bringing something to the table. That's a huge issue. There's a lot of nonprofits who just think, oh, I'm so grateful you've even asked to be on the board.
I know. Or sometimes it's we desperately need a lawyer.
Right.
Or an accountant, so we'll just take the first one that we get introduced to, and you end up with just somebody who's just brings that skill, but nothing related
else
to your important charitable work.
And they might think that they save $10,000 a year on legal costs, but they lose $100,000 a year by not having the right person connected with a nonprofit. So that's really important that they look at what is the cost effectiveness of what a person is bringing to their nonprofit organization.
Yeah. All right. So that's excellent for board recruitment. How about hiring employees within the organization? What do you like to see CEOs and executive directors doing?
I have been speaking where people are unemployed for over 20 years. And I am surprised because I have a little blank card and I have them write on there, what would I like to do most of anything now that I don't have a job?
Right.
And I would say 20% say that they want to work with a nonprofit in any fashion. Some even say they'll work for free just so that they can be part of that community and giving back. When a nonprofit is looking for an executive director, that person better be a networker. They better be the handshaker. They need to be up to date on technology, open-minded, trying different fundraising concepts instead of the same old thing. Because what worked 5 years ago does not even come close to working today.
Yeah.
And so they have to always be on top of what the technology is. We heard this morning how text messaging is so important because the 30-year-olds are now not opening email, and even 10% of everybody in the world only opens their email.
Was that Aria Finger who was talking about texting too?
Exactly.
Yeah, I just had her as a guest before you.
Right.
She came on and was talking about actually 15 and 16-year-olds, motivating them. And she said, get them where they are. Text.
Right.
Sending 4,200 messages a month for 16-year-old girls or something. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So, that's what keeping up with technology will do for someone, is always looking at what else can they do. Most nonprofits don't have a blog. That's a big mistake because that...
Who in the nonprofit do you like to see doing that blog? In the name of the executive director?
It should be in the name of the executive director because that builds the relationship with the person who has the most visibility in the community and the most visibility and able to make decisions for the nonprofit. Because a lot of times you can have someone else write it in the office, but it should be in the name of the executive director.
Okay. Let's talk a little more about hiring. Now, we've talked about the board, what the board should be looking for in the executive director. What should the executive director be doing to make sure that he or she is hiring the right people that are going to be supporting?
Well, I think the skill set is going to depend on how much the nonprofit is doing in the community. So if it's just administrative work, that's one thing. That's easy to do. But the biggest give back in a nonprofit is the person who has that innovative ability to figure out how they can use technology, how they can reach out into the community, draw more people in. There's so many different things. Like, most people don't realize that you can actually go to a restaurant and say, I have an event coming up in 30 days. And almost every restaurant will say, because you're a nonprofit, I'll donate a lunch. Right? And then what I would do is I would package 12 lunches and have it lunch for a year and auction it off, and just simple little things like that. If you have people who are willing to go out into the community and do things like that, the payback, that employee ends up paying for their own salary.
And when we're in the hiring process, how do we make sure we're getting somebody like that in our...
The questions, I think, would be, how do you feel about being out in the business community? Are you comfortable picking up the phone and talking to people you don't know? What would you do in a situation where we need to create a new event? What would you suggest? How would we go about creating an event? And see how people are creative or not. There's also facial recognition techniques. And I teach a course, it's called About Face, and it actually helps me figure out what your face tells me about how to communicate with you, but also how well you communicate with other people. So someone who has a larger bottom lip is a good listener. Right? It's great if you need them to listen, but if they're the person who has to be out in the community speaking, you want them to have a larger upper lip.
All right, we're going to talk more about this very, very, very shortly. I just want to remind listeners that I'm with Sharyn Abbott at the NextGen Charity Conference 2011 in New York City. Her latest book is Is this the latest, Mixing It Up? Or is the one
this has just been revised, but I have 8 books published.
Okay. Well, we're giving credit to this one because it's related to our topic. It's Mixing It Up, the Entrepreneur's New Testament. And you'll find Sharyn Abbott at SharynAbbott.com, but you need to know that she spells her name Sharyn. And 2 B's and 2 T's in Abbott. And then .com. So I should have just spelled the whole thing out instead of pieces. Sharyn, and then an A, and then at the end there's 2 T's, and then after the A there's 2 B's.
Very clear.
How do we know? Yeah, I've botched it totally. No, SharynAbbott.com. Someone who's a good listener has a larger lower lip. How does that? Why is that true?
Well, back in Aristotle's time in the 14th century, he began this whole study. It's called physiognomy. And Judge Jones in 1935, Ed Jones in Chicago, started looking at people who were presented to him in his courtroom, and he kept a log. And he went guilty, not guilty, guilty, not guilty. And according to the jury's findings, he was 90% accurate based on looking at someone's face. So I took that information and I thought, wait a minute, what if we could use this for communication styling? So if I look at you, I know that you like it when people get to the point. You want people that's based on
Are
your...
you looking at me now, right?
Yeah, I'm looking at you, Tony.
Right okay. All right. I like it when people get to the point based on what makes you draw that conclusion?
Your nose.
But how does a physical feature convey a personality?
There's a science to it. This is actually the science of reading your face. So I know that I'm going to get to the point. I'm not going to take the long way around. So
okay, I'm going to actually say that she's right. But I think I'm a patient listener also. I don't.
Well, your lip is larger on the bottom than the top. So you're a really good listener, almost twice as good at listening as you are of speaking, and you know you're good at speaking. So the difference is...
This is all ego. Now I'm blushing, too. What does blushing cheeks mean?
It means you can still feel.
There must be some downsides. Show me something. Tell me about something that I'm a shortcoming that you recognize.
Let's say I needed to explain a project to you. The squareness at the bottom of your chin tells me I have to get to the point, which means I can't tell you all about the details.
But also my nose conveyed that to you, too.
Right. But there's this point where you're going, I don't want to know how you're going to build it. I just want to know when it's going to be built. And so people who have a need to explain every detail will get very frustrated because you're looking at me going, I've got things to do. Just tell me what I need to do, and we're done.
All right, this is embarrassing now because she's sizing me up. This is pretty accurate. This is not like fortune telling either. I mean, this is anything else? Is there anything else?
Oh, absolutely.
All right, got one more. Go ahead. I'm the guinea pig. No, I don't mind. This is actually quite insightful. It's interesting.
This portion right above your eyebrows is fairly flat.
Now, for radio listeners, she's putting her finger in between my eyebrows.
Right.
In between her eyebrows.
My eyebrows, not yours.
There's no contact. She's sizing me up, and there's no physical contact at all. It's unbelievable.
So this tells me that you like information in order. So you want to give me this first, then this, then that, in order.
But I pluck my brows. So does that? If I had one brow straight across, would that?
Unibrow? No, not in style anymore.
Okay.
No, this is the logic. This is like mine is flat right here.
She's talking about the space between her eyebrows and the forehead.
Right. So I have a logical personality. You have a logical personality. So you really want things in order first. There's a lot of people who you'll see it's just totally slanted back. Those are the people who they understand a process and then they immediately know how it applies to them long term.
Physiognomy is the
physiognomy.
Okay, that's the practice. You can Google physiognomy and Sharyn Abbott as well. We're gonna go off this now, but that was
fun, huh?
That was pretty much on point. Yeah, I didn't disagree with anything you just told me about myself, and I learned something. Okay, let's talk a little about your positive communication techniques, since we're talking about the way people like to communicate and you're judging this by their face.
Right.
What are some of the positive communication techniques that people should be using?
Well, I think it's really difficult for a lot of people to stay positive in what I believe is a perceived economy. Now, I cannot argue with the numbers. We do have the highest unemployment rate at this time. There are fewer people donating to nonprofits, to kind of get back on point. So how do we actually project a positive attitude when we know that this is on everyone's mind? So my attitude is no one came along, scraped up all the money, and locked it up, and they're not magically waiting to the day that everybody says, okay, we can take the money out now. So where is the money? It's just moved. So when we're communicating with people and we start thinking about, all right, so what do I have to do to be the person that somebody wants to give what they have allocated, their 10% to a nonprofit? communicating in a positive manner instead of, we need money, we need to raise this funds. It would be, when people are involved with our nonprofit, these are the benefits. This is what we're giving back to the community. And the long-term benefit for you is. So it's turning something around. You're saying the same thing, but in a positive manner, and making the person that you're talking with more comfortable with the idea of being involved.
Okay.
So it's a simple technique, but it's phrasing, how you actually phrase what you're talking about, and allowing the other person. So this is where this comes into play. If you're talking to somebody who has a larger upper lip, you make sure that they have more than enough time to talk.
Okay. Let's give an example of phrasing something positively that in a positive way. Can we do that? That someone that wouldn't be, well, let's take a negative and make it sort of a positive so people can understand making this the positive communication.
Okay, give me a negative.
I'm cold. The room is cold. I'm too cold in this room.
Instead of saying, I'm too cold, I mean, that's an easy fix.
All right, well, let's start easy.
Let's
Oh, well.
put on a sweater, put on a jacket, let's move a little bit. Start getting your blood moving a little bit so that you can actually be warmer. But let's say a challenging one would be, I've called all these people and no one's calling me back.
Okay, that's good.
Right? Yeah. And that happens a lot. When I'm actually very business oriented, which I think makes a big difference. A lot of people get into nonprofit and they think it is not for profit. And nonprofits have to be profit minded. So they have to know that they're making more money than what it costs them to run the organization. So I do things like, I make 20 dials. I know that 10 people answer the phone. I know that if I leave 5 voicemail messages, only one person's going to call me back. Is it worth my while to return those calls and call somebody who doesn't call me back? So do I look at the possibility that that person's out of town, busy, family things going on, and then call them again anyway? So my rule of thumb is, you take a situation where somebody says, nobody's calling me back, I don't know what to do, and then they get into that funk. So how do you turn it around?
Right.
So what I found is that for every organization, there is a time of day, a day of the week that has the best return. So if I call on Monday morning at 9 o'clock, I'm not likely to get the right people to answer the phone because they're setting up their week. They've got their sales meetings, whatever is going on. So I know that if I call at 11:30, people are kind of wrapping up their morning and they're getting ready for lunch. If I call at 1:30, they've just gotten back for lunch. They might be late back from lunch. So there's these windows of time, 10 to 11, 1 to 3. And I know that Monday's not the best day and Friday's not the best day. So if I make my calls Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, then I'm going to have a much better ratio. If I can improve my ratios even 10%, then I improve my bottom line. So why not treat a business like a nonprofit as a true business and actually track what we're doing, having results, so that we know that if this isn't working, we have to shift and start doing something else. So most people keep doing the same thing over and over again, and it drives them crazy, right? The definition of insanity. But they don't ever realize all they have to do is shift what it is that they're doing so that they end up having better results.
We have to stop there. Sharyn Abbott, one of her 8 books is Mixing It Up, The Entrepreneur's New Testament. I want to thank you very much for being a guest, Sharyn. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you, Tony.
Thank you, even with my big lower lip. Tony Martignetti, nonprofit radio coverage of the NextGen Charity Conference 2011. Thank you very much for joining us.